Students of history at Lewis Clark State College, I thought it might be worthwhile spending a little time in my basement today discussing something with you that you probably learned in high school, but you might need a short refresher course over just to remember how to do it. And what are we talking about here? Oh, yeah, that's right. How to write a 5 paragraph essay. And for historians, the 5 paragraph essay is fundamental. The argumentative essay is fundamental. Whether you're writing a 2 page thought piece or a 4 to 6 page formal essay for History 101 or 102, or whether you decide to take some advanced history courses later on and you're writing a longer research paper, the style's the same. The style's the same. So I want to make sure you understand the style because I think it'll make your job way easier putting together the writing for the course. So the basic structure for the 5 paragraph essay, I imagine we all know. It's an introduction, your evidence, and your conclusion. And there's nothing, I've lost the word, that doesn't have to be 5 paragraphs. It can be the 6 paragraph essay because you have 4 points. It can be the 7 paragraph essay because you have 5 points. It can be the 9 paragraph essay because you needed 2 points for or 2 paragraphs for your introduction and 2 points for your conclusion because you had some sophistication there, and this is a longer paper. But the 5 paragraph essay gives you some basic ways to conceptualize what you're supposed to be doing for your writing in this class. An intro, point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and a conclusion. And just super old school, right? Intro, tell the reader what you're going to tell them. The body, tell them. Conclusion, tell the reader what you told them. Now the introduction, right? It's tell the reader what you're going to tell them. The reader should not be able to get through your introduction and not know what your essay is going to be about. And for the formal essays, I should not be able to get through the first paragraph and not know what question you're answering. With a twist. I don't want you to say, I'm answering question number 3. All right, you don't want to bore the reader in the intro. I get it. This is an assignment. Your writing should not make it sound like an assignment. Okay? Your writing should make it sound like you're just presenting a historical argument, and that way you might even be able to get some mileage out of it on the job market if somebody asks you for a piece of short writing, just to kind of see how you write. With the introduction, you want to hook the reader, get them interested. I'm usually not that into a bunch of fluff, but a little fluff here, if you're a good writer, might be the way to do it. Especially if you got some kind of metaphor that you want to try to hook the reader with at the beginning and then come back to it at the end. That can be kind of cool. But a way to hook the reader, get them interested. This part of your essay should be clean. It should be free of grammatical errors. It should be free of spelling. The first sentences, the entire introduction should be very easy to read, because what you don't want is the reader stumbling through some clunky sentences and wondering, what is this really about, before you even get a chance to get going, right? Other things your introduction should do. It should state your thesis, your argument, the point of your essay, what historical question you're trying to answer. However you're approaching it, that's the thing you're doing with your thesis, right? And then you should also give an outline of your plan to present your points. Ha! You got a plan, right? You need a plan. So here's the deal. If you were taking a chemistry class and you walked into the chem lab and you just started grabbing chemicals off the shelf, mixing them together, shaking them up, putting them on the Bunsen burner with no real plan about why you were doing those things, no real intention, no real method. Who knows, man? Maybe you poisoned everybody in the building. And history is the same way. Some of y'all are going to want to just start grabbing a bunch of stuff, right? And throw it all together and see what you get. You're going to get a mess. And it's going to read like a mess because it wasn't intentional. And so think a little bit about your plan. You know, here's the question I'm dealing with. Here is the issue I'm dealing with. And I've picked this particular evidence for a reason. And I'm presenting it in a particular order for a reason. And you don't have to become overly complicated with this, but to just kind of have an idea as to why I chose this as to something else and why I'm going to start with it. That's what you want. You want to show some intentionality in the way that you present your points. Let's talk about the conclusion. Tell the reader what you told them. Again, restate your thesis. Restate your argument. Don't let the reader forget the whole point of your paper. You're just going to keep on coming with, your thesis and your argument. Explain why your results are interesting or important. By this point, we're getting into your results. Maybe explain your results. And then why you think these results are worth talking about. And the conclusion's a really good place to connect the essay to the contemporary world, maybe something going on the news that it sheds some light on, or your life in general. It's a good spot for that. If you need page length, I'll give you a guess. Your introduction, I don't know, maybe a third of a page for a 4-page essay. Your conclusion, maybe 2/3 of a page for a 4-page essay, and then that gives you a page each, right, for each point. Your mileage will vary, but that gives you some idea of ratio in terms of how each of these elements should be set up in your paper. So that's your conclusion. And your conclusion's important. It's the last thing the reader's going to read, kind of. Because I'm telling you right now, I would say that at least 50% of the time, the conclusion is the first thing I read. I want to see what you came up with at the end, and then I go back. Actually, it's the second thing I read. The first thing I read are your footnotes, and then I go to your conclusion. So you want it to be good. You want it to be clean. Your points. This is the body of your paper. This is where you discuss how your evidence support your thesis and your argument. And keep in mind, when we're talking about the evidence, we're talking about the documents from the Worlds of History book. Whether this is a thought piece or whether this is a formal essay, or maybe you're watching this for an upper division class, first and foremost, historical work is discussion of the evidence. It's discussion of the documents. Make sure it's in there. So how do you do that? Each of the paragraphs for each point, you need a transition sentence. You remember those from high school? Introductory sentences, transitions, connecting all the different paragraphs together. You need that stuff. Stuff that will remind the reader of your thesis and how the evidence that you're about to introduce is actually connected to it. Keep in mind, right? I've said many times, the history degree is a traditional route into law school because historical argument and legal argument is almost the same. Judge, I bring in such and such an eyewitness, and I'm bringing them because they provide this particular angle on the event. Well, you do that with your documents, right? And then you describe the document or you describe the evidence. What does it say? And then you provide some level of analysis. Well, what does it mean? Right? How do you read between the lines? This is what the Code of Hammurabi says. This is what we can understand from the fact that it's even there, the analysis, right? And then at the end of each of your points, you probably need some kind of like a one sentence mini conclusion that helps you move the argument forward. And frankly, they set up your final conclusion. I'm a huge fan of ending every paragraph with some kind of mini conclusion and then seeing if I can get any mileage out of cutting all those mini conclusions out, pasting them at the end, and then merge them into some kind of grander conclusion. You know, sometimes you just got to throw it away. And sometimes something happens that's, hey, look at that. That's actually a pretty good way to start my intro. I'm reminding the reader of all this stuff we've covered. Now I'm getting into some other things. So anyway, how you can shape your points and all that kind of stuff. So this is, one look at the outline, right? The introduction, and then I'm going to talk about document one. In this particular case, maybe, each of those paragraphs, you got two documents in there. We'll talk about document 1 and 2, and we'll talk about document 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And you got to find a way so they're related to each other and all that, right? And the conclusion. Another slightly different way to do it, although it's really the same way, right, is point number 1. And then to support point 1, here comes document 1. Here comes document 2. To support point number 2, here comes document 3 and document 4. You guys get the idea. It's a document discussion. Outlining your essay might be more useful than you think in terms of providing some structure. Most good writers do not just start with sentence number 1 and start writing, and then it just magically flows out. I structure. I've known people who, almost outline things to the sentence. They definitely outline the paragraph. I'm going to start with this idea, then I'm going to start with this idea, and with this idea. Basically they make a map of how they think it's going to work. And you can change the map as you go, but having a map actually makes the writing faster than trying to do it on the fly and discovering that, wow, wasn't quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. So think about outlining this stuff and making yourself a map, and that'll give you some of that intentionality that I asked for before. And be brilliant. Be brilliant with all this. And just give yourself an opportunity to and use the historical terms. Use years, right? I'm not asking you to memorize any of it, but put it in your paper. Use names. Use dates. Don't forget those footnotes. I got the separate videos on the footnotes. So that's almost everything I have. I got one other thing because I'm skeptical that some of these videos are being watched at the level that they should be watched. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a quiz over this video. And the only question I'm going to ask you on the quiz is, what is Professor Martin's favorite book? Or at least what is one of his favorite books? And that should be easy enough. You just go ahead and write that down on the quiz, and we'll take that as your proof that you learned or reviewed how to write a 5-paragraph essay. You guys don't think twice about getting in touch with me if you've got any questions, and enjoy your historical studies.